Hey, this is Liberty DeVitto, and you're listening to Glass Houses, a Billy Joel podcast.
Welcome to Glass Houses, a Billy Joel podcast. I'm Michael Grosvenor.
And I'm Jack Firneno. Join us as we dig deep into Billy Joel's songs and history and what his music has meant to us.
Sometimes the best part about the holidays are the leftovers. Picking at that feast you just enjoyed the day before can taste better than when it was just cooked.
And as the 2021 holiday season wraps up, we're bringing you a second helping of Glass Houses, a Billy Joel podcast.
It's been an amazing year for us, and with all the great topics and interviews we've touched on, not everything made it into the episodes you heard so far.
So we're bringing you interview excerpts, extraneous conversations, and a few extra emails from listeners that didn't make it onto the show.
There's plenty of gravy to go around, so sit back and unbutton your pants as we throw some turkey legs and mashed potatoes into the microwave with our first ever end of the year Odds and Ends episode.
We made it. We made it. I hope we made it because we're recording this a few weeks in advance, but we made it to the end of 2021.
It's wild to think that we're wrapping up our second calendar year. What a ride.
There have been a whole bunch of jokes. Well, I guess it was mostly coming out in 2020, like, hey, it's the 20s again. You know, guys got to start dressing dapper, this and that. Let me tell you, 2021, I don't know what happened. I officially became an old man. Let me tell you the three things I got into this year. Classic Universal horror movies. I got reacquainted with the Marx Brothers via the Marx Brothers Council podcast, and I'm wrapping up the year playing in the pit for a production of Anything Goes, which got me listening to the old Benny Goodman famous 1938 Carnegie Hall jazz concert, for which I was just showing Michael because I finally have some show and tell to do. I found this great book that just details that concert, you know, down to like. It goes through every song. It goes through the history. It has like the diagram of the microphones, everything. So as soon as I'm done editing the rest of this year's episodes, I think I get to sit down with the fireplace and a copy of the record and read this book. And that's going to be my Christmas present to me.
Yeah, I could totally nerd out on that. And another thing I mentioned to Jack too, that I don't know if y'all out there have Disney Plus, but the new Beatles documentary Get Back is out now. And I had the good fortune to see it over the Thanksgiving holiday weekend. And I tell you, it's long. It's broken up into 3 parts. It's 8 hours roughly total, but it is incredible. It is essentially a month in the life of the Beatles. This was all filmed every single day practically in January 1969. Incredible film quality. And to see these guys writing these songs that have become some of the most classic songs of all time. It's incredible. And then also seeing them working up songs that the Beatles would never do something with. That would become like a Ringo song or a George Harrison song. And but just to watch these guys joke around, create, have fights, it's like some kind of monster in 1969.
I was just about to say that. I was just about to make that comparison.
To the point where George quits the band for like 5 days.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't getting his creative outlet in the Beatles because Paul and John were running the show and Ringo was the quiet one kind of going with it. So I'm like, holy shit, this is Metallica. You got James and Lars, John and Paul. Jason Newsted is George Harrison, who couldn't get his creativity out, so he wanted to do his own thing.
Right.
And then you have Kirk Hammett, which was Ringo, who's just keeping the peace, trying to go with the flow.
You've got to be the first person to make that comparison. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less, but you got to be the first one.
If I can connect it to Metallica, if there's a way, I'll find it.
And I'm not even going to cut that one out. I'll leave it in. And if this episode, so far for the couple minutes we've been in seems pretty scattershot, I guess that's in theme. We're wrapping up what, really became a blockbuster year for us, and we can't thank you all enough. And we'll get into that in a moment too. But the crux of this episode is some stuff that got left on the cutting room floor. Some interviews, particularly when we were putting together that 2-parter on Russell. We just heard so many great stories that we couldn't fit them in. So anything that didn't have to do with Russell got cut out of that episode. And so we're including that here. Had some great conversations with Jesse Javors about his own music. Some really cool information about Robert Johnson, legendary blues guitarist. And then Liberty, in the middle of talking to Michael about Russell, would just, spin off into these other anecdotes that, it pained me to take the digital razor blade to them at the time. Then I was like, no, you know what? We'll use these again at the end of the year. You're getting ready for the holidays. If you're doing shopping, maybe you're snowed in. Who knows what's going on so far? Just a couple last few tidbits, extra highlights from 2021 from our podcast.
Yeah, I'm really glad we could, put some of these together. We have a tendency to get a little long-winded sometimes when we initially record, and we're obviously always trying to be respectful of our guests' time. But, when we'll do an episode just us, we'll talk for 2 hours and whittle it down to 50 minutes. All these guys, Liberty, Russell, Richie, Jesse, all had such good stories, and I feel like I've known some of them forever. Some of them I have, but it was just a lot of fun, comfortable conversation. There was some fun stuff here, so I'm really glad we kept it aside in a folder that we could put some of it out here.
Yeah, for sure. But before we get into those, let's dip into the mailbag.
I tell you what, every one of these emails has such a unique story. That's what I love about this.
Yeah.
We all have the common thread of Billy Joel, but everyone's backstories are very different, and their concert experiences, their memories of albums, all so many different stories. And it's so telling of, how universal Billy's music is.
Our first letter comes from Jason Skidmore. He writes, "Good morning, guys. I'm a new listener and just picked up on your album openers episode. I was gifted Innocent Man back in the 80s. My dad had Piano Man on cassette. And then ABC broadcast The Russian Special, which is still ensconced on a home-recorded VHS, along with the WXYZ broadcast of Bowie's Glass Spider Tour. The Russia album is definitely deserving of inclusion as a studio-quality album, particularly for this episode, while Odoya in the video package is part of a larger immersion into the Russians as a people rather than as a monolith. That Odoya Angry Young Man combo says, yes, we respect your culture, now hold my stoli. At 14, that was the first time I heard that song, and the frenetic opening blew my mind. The radio hits are not the best things he's written. You have to go to the albums to appreciate the variety and the personal nature of his songwriting. And that is my number one Billy opener. My other bone to pick with this list is the digs on Not Her Style. While true, the lyrical content may not be the most sophisticated, it made a good statement for a return to the band in a room thing that this band is best at. Innocent Man was his nostalgic album. Bridge was his, rather weak, attempt at synth pop. Stormfront hits hard from that first song. That opener, Extremes, the title track, Shameless, they're all just balls to the wall. And then he loses me on the back half of side 2. If you ask me, the better collection of songs would have been to never even write Fire, or at the very least to follow the original intent of the song. Wrap side 1 with Stormfront, excise side 2, and release it as an EP. Anyway, as a lifelong Billy acolyte, I'm eager to dig into more of these episodes.
And Jason's writing to us from Dearborn, Michigan. And the giveaway for me was him talking about WXYZ ABC, which was Channel 7, the affiliate in Detroit. I'm very familiar with that. I actually, funny enough, I played in a band with a guy who was a news anchor there. He did the evening news. This guy, Stephen Clark. We had a country band that he fronted. So during the week, he was pretty much at the studio from mid-afternoon to after the 11 o'clock news. He couldn't get out, but we could come to him. And so we would set up in the B studio, like the studio they weren't using for the news. And in between like the 7 o'clock news and the 11 o'clock news, we would rehearse at the TV station. So we'd load in and set up while he's finishing the 7 o'clock news, and he'd come in, take off his coat, he'd be still in his tie, the whole bit, and we'd sit down and rehearse, and occasionally some of the other on-air talent would come wandering by and listen for a bit. But yeah, it was a pretty regular occurrence. We would actually rehearse there at Channel 7.
That's great. And no one ever knew. All those viewers at home didn't know that he was rehearsing in the next room in between the broadcasts.
That's right.
That's fantastic. I like this. Jason throws down some interesting gauntlets here. I love the fact that he had the Russian special and the Bowie tour on the same VHS. That is such an 80s, 90s thing to have your own personal random VHS that you'll always remember as Billy Joel and then David Bowie.
Yep.
And that's like a relationship that only you're going to have with those videos.
I recorded that same special as it aired also on Channel 7. So I have a similar recording of that somewhere tucked away on a VHS tape.
So I like what he's got to say about the Odoya Angry Young Man. I hope I'm saying that right. But yeah, conceptually that is a good point. So I'll take it.
Yeah.
Similarly with That's Not Her Style, he did. Yeah. There were a couple songs on Stormfront that were really back to just being, the band in the room kind of feel. I mean, I guess we're assuming so. I don't know if you've got any information on what those sessions were like, if because it wasn't Phil Ramone, so they may not have done it that way. But I guess it feels like that. At least that's not her style.
Right. And I think that was the approach for a lot of the record, to have it sound big and have it sound live, even though there's a myriad of overdubs and whatnot throughout. This album is a very guitar-heavy album. Most of the guitars are by David Brown. Russell had already exited the band, and a lot of the guitars were David Brown and also some by Mick Jones from Foreigner, who produced the record.
Yeah.
And you could tell that Billy wanted to get more into a rock sound too, because he was talking with Eddie Van Halen to produce the album.
Yeah.
And Eddie wasn't available. They were probably working on For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, if my timeline is correct. Or it might have been, that was probably the one. Or what was the second record? OU812. Probably OU812.
I can't imagine Eddie Van Halen, producing a Billy Joel album. I mean, I guess you couldn't imagine Mick Jones from Foreigner doing it.
Right.
But all I'm imagining is, Eddie Van Halen guitar now on like We Didn't Start the Fire, or like I Go to Extremes. It just comes in like this flurry of finger tapping out of nowhere.
Right.
Because what's going to happen. At some point that's going on the record.
Right. Yeah. It's really hard to imagine. So I think Mick Jones was a great choice, because Mick does come from a guitar sensibility. So he was able to help push the guitars towards the front of these songs. And a lot of the album was mixed by Jay Headley. I think he was the engineer and he mixed it. I don't have the credits in front of me. But that record it is his biggest sounding album.
Yeah.
By a mile. The guitars sound thick and big, and those drums sound huge.
They do. And you don't realize it until you sort of listen to it next to some other albums. I mean, at least I didn't, because that was the one that was the one that like I came online for. And my parents had it on CD, and they had the other stuff on cassette recorded from vinyl. So I think even as a kid, I sort of understood that it was a second generation copy, and whatever nascent sense of production I had when I was 8 years old, I wasn't going to, pick up on like, this release doesn't have as much piano on it. Interesting. Like, you're not going to think that way, but
right.
Looking back, when you listen to it as an adult, especially when you're going through the albums, you're like, wow, this really does sound a lot different even from the bridge.
Look what was dominating radio in the late 80s was a lot of guitar heavy bands. Now, granted, it didn't have the heaviness of thrash metal by any means, but you had.
But wait, which thrash metal band could you possibly be referring to right now?
Exodus, come on.
Clearly Testament. Sorry, go on.
No, but those, guitar forward and guitar heavy bands were all over rock radio. And, along with the hair metal of the world, the 80s ushered in, the mid 80s especially, big drum sounds, huge drum sounds into the 80s and 90s. Yeah. And Stormfront in 89 fits right in the middle of all that. So that really makes sense why that album sounded so big. And that wasn't part of Phil Ramone's style. He came from the Paul Simons and the Frank Sinatras of the world. So you were never going to get that kind of record with Phil Ramone.
That's not his style. I win. All right. Well, Jason, thanks again for writing in. You've given us much to think about. I'm definitely thinking a lot about Stormfront as an EP. I don't know. I would put State of Grace on there though.
I love
I'd
State of
keep
Grace.
State of
That's a
Grace from side
standout
two.
to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I could do without We Didn't Start the Fire. I could do without When in Rome. I could see And So It Goes not being on this record, just being somewhere else on its own.
Musically, and with the production, Win in Rome kind of reminds me of like the Saturday Night Live opening.
Yeah.
With the drums and the sax kick in. I suddenly in the back of my head hear, it's Saturday Night Live.
Phil Hartman, rest his soul.
Starring Dana Carvey.
Yeah, it's like either that or an episode like Perfect Strangers or something. It's very, very like late 80s TV theme show.
Right.
Very NBC, I guess Perfect Strangers was ABC.
That's right.
But whatever.
And this next one's from our friend Robert Niebel. Robert's written in a few times before, and it's always good to hear from him. He writes, "Hi guys. I love your latest episode with Mike Del Judas. I just love how he talks. He's so down to earth and filled with positive energy. Just like you all, I look forward to Mike's upcoming album. Mike's songwriting is indeed top notch. Just go out there and look up the Mona Lisa video, and one will see why Mike is first rate. What I love about Mike is that he will explain the secret to the Billy Joel Band magic in terms that most of us can understand without getting too inside baseball. I met Mike back in 2015 after a Billy Joel show in Atlanta. It might have been the second time that Mike performed the Tush snippet in the middle of River of Dreams. I asked him about it that evening, and he said he previously did it in Dallas, which of course received a very positive response there, and of course in Atlanta. Here's a little sidebar to that Dallas show. TV, radio, podcast personality Glenn Beck walked out of the show. Why? Mr. Beck said that Billy wasn't playing enough hits and was bantering too much with his band. What show did that guy attend? I can say things about Glenn Beck, but as Mama once said, if you have nothing nice to say, then don't say it at all. 2 years after meeting Mike, I produced a feature on him for CNN's Airport Network, which I mentioned to you both in my last email. Last August, I was at the Fenway show. I confess that Billy's current band always takes it up a notch every time out. This was their first show after the COVID period, and they sound even better these days. Mike totally knocked it out of the park that evening, filling in for Andy Shashon. Keep up the good work, guys. Best, Robert.
All right, Robert, always great to hear from you. Great points about Mike. He does explain a lot of why it works and how without getting too technical, which, you know me, I love getting technical, but you have a good point that he does put it in very, sort of, I guess, easy to understand terms. I'm not easy to understand, but universal terms, let's say.
Yeah, he certainly does do that. And I first started talking with Mike probably, I want to say 8 years ago, probably 2012 is when I got hip to Big Shot. And, he and I would banter back and forth, nerd out about Billy on and off through Facebook and whatnot. And I tell you what, he's the same guy then that he is now that he's been in the Billy Joel Band for 8 years. He's just such a genuine, down-to-earth guy. And with us, has been incredibly generous with his time. And he really appreciates all of you out there as well, certainly.
You get that sense of you feel like he's walking on stage for the first time every time, the way he talks about it.
He's forever grateful.
So just for fun, I picked up the 2015 Dallas show on Setlist FM. We're assuming it's right for a moment. Let's see what we got here. He opens with A Matter of Trust, Pressure, Everybody Loves You Now, Vienna, and it says that was audience choice over Summer Highland Falls and Shameless. Zanzibar, New York State of Mind, then Shameless, audience choice over Sleeping with the Television On, and All for Lena. Ballad of Billy the Kid, quick cover of The Magnificent Seven, Moving Out, The Entertainer, Allentown, My Life, Sometimes a Fantasy, She's Always a Woman, Highway to Hell, Don't Ask Me Why, River of Dreams, Scenes from an Italian Restaurant, Piano Man, Still Rock and Roll to Me, You May Be Right, and Only the Good Die Young. Now, I seem to be in Mr. Niebel's camp when it comes to talking or not talking about Glenn Beck.
Yeah.
I would give him a tiny bit of quarter on this, because there are a couple deep cuts on here, but this is pretty stacked. You know what? That's the reason why Billy doesn't sell the front rows. Because you're going to get these guys that if you don't play like greatest hits 1 and 2 all the way through,
Yep.
they're going to stare at you dead-eyed, because you did Shameless. And the rest of us in the back are like, oh, man, I've never heard this one live ever.
Right.
Well,
and shoot, Shameless, it was a single, but it wasn't a big hit for Billy. It was Garth Brooks' biggest hit. So even those who don't know Billy's version that well probably know Garth's version.
Especially in Dallas, one would imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, this is actually a pretty cool show.
Yeah.
I like Matter of Trust as an opener. It goes right into Pressure. You get a little bit of Cold Spring Harbor in there.
Yeah.
Zanzibar was pretty common by then.
Ever since Carl joined the band, that's been a mainstay because that is certainly his big feature.
I mean, what else are you going to complain about after that? Don't Ask Me Why or like The Entertainer, just because they're not, the ones everybody knows, but like, those songs.
Well, just goes to show you can't please everybody, because here you have him complaining that he didn't play enough hits. And then I'm sure there was people complaining he didn't play enough deep cuts. So it's like, at the end of the day, you just got to do what you feel is right for the show and come along for the ride or not. But it's like, you can't win.
Also, bantering too much with the band, like, that's kind of half the fun, Like,
that's what makes the shows unique. Like, of all these classic Billy videos that we've watched and some of these bootleg shows that we've watched and listened to, some of my favorite moments are that funny back and forth banter between everybody, where they're just screwing with each other and having fun. Because to me, if that's going on, then they're feeling like they're having a good show.
Right. Yeah, they're not just clocking in and out.
If that's happening and that vibe is loose and fun, then to me, that's a good show.
So I got a short one here really quick that I'll shout out because he's from my neck of the woods. This is from Greg Breslin. Says, I'm a real huge Billy Joel fan from the Philadelphia area. Seen Billy Joel 14 times live since the Glass Houses tour. Love all the anecdotes and details you discussed. Really look forward to listening to all your podcasts. Keeping the faith, Greg. Greg, thanks so much for listening. We appreciate your email. That's awesome. You've definitely seen a nice range of shows if it's been since Glass Houses. So as we mentioned, our first interview tidbit here is Jesse Javors, Russell Javors' son. He's going to talk about his own songwriting and also his work with the Robert Johnson Foundation.
Granddad fought in World War II. He shed his blood for me and you. It was a different time, a different place, when free meant free and great meant great. Now Granddad's gone, he's up on high, but when he looks down, he starts to cry. How many ways can we let him down before we will see? How many days can I bite my tongue before I can speak? My home, sweet home, oh babe, it's a good and gone. My home, sweet home, oh babe, it's a good and gone. My home, sweet home, feeling like the fall of Rome, like the fall of Rome.
I've been writing furiously and I have about an album's worth of material ready now. I put that song out a couple of months ago because it was of the moment, and but I plan to put it back up there properly and release it along with a lot of material. So but I've been doing that, which is what I'll call sort of just my own work. But I'm also, as it relates to the music industry, I work with the Robert Johnson Blues Foundation as well. So I'm helping Robert's family really reboot the the foundation and think of new and interesting ways to honor the Robert Johnson legacy and across all sort of touch points. My professional background has been entertainment, so I was one of the guys way back when helped AMC move into becoming a premium content brand from a classic movie channel, and spent a lot of time at HGTV and Food Network. So I've got a lot of brand building experience. So trying to use that to something that I'm a lot more passionate about than cooking eggs and putting up drywall.
Right, understandable. But that's great though that you were able to find something to where you could use that past experience and just have a little more something for you.
There'll be things to talk about in the future with that, but for right now, that's my other touch point. Back to the music industry. I work with Stephen Johnson, Robert's grandson, and his brother Michael, and they're out of Mississippi, and we're working on what the foundation is going to look like and some other cool things going forward.
How'd you come to work with them?
Part of my musical influence has been my father, of course, but then it has been the blues and folk music, and Robert Johnson as one of those key figures in that mix. And so a couple of years ago, as I was trying to reconnect to the things that I really enjoy doing, I said to myself, I wonder if anyone is really doing anything with the Robert Johnson brand. And I looked around, and it was around that time, I think, that Netflix rebooted this great documentary on Robert Johnson that has John Hammond in it, which is another one of my musical heroes. And so that's where I saw Stephen, and I forgot how I connected with him, but I just connected with him and told him I had some great ideas. And we have become really good friends, and we've got some cool stuff that's going to come here on the horizon pretty soon.
It wasn't until probably over the last 10 or so years that I really got more hip to blues and folk music, just through some artists that I was working with. I did a tour with Taj Mahal that opened up a whole new world of appreciation. Are you familiar at all with Tom Paxton?
A little bit.
He goes back to the Greenwich Village days with Dylan and all that stuff. And I've been working with him going on 10, 12 years, just kind of running his online presence and helping him with whatever little odds and ends. But he's like early 80s now and still performing, writing, touring, you name it. He's busier than he's ever been. Incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that scene was so cool. Obviously well before my time, but it's really something. That's part of the void, I think, that there is with, dare I venture into these waters, but with modern music, we're living in these unbelievably tumultuous times, and where are the songs about that? What's happening? Nobody's singing about it, and they should be. And they did in the 60s, and for whatever reasons, they're not now. So that's something that I I try and address in my music.
I almost wonder if it's because of the climate today, if people are more afraid of backlash than what they feel they need to get out there.
Yeah, it's true. And, there very well might be some apprehension in doing so. It is a different day. It's even a different day since the end of last year in many ways. But regardless of what your political views are, there's a lot of topics to cover. So I think people should be singing.
What is it about Robert Johnson, do you think, that's really stood the test of time? Is it partially just that lore of there's like one or two photos of him, just a handful of songs that got released? Or is that combined with just what he was doing was that powerful and unique?
I think the lore certainly added to his mystique, but it's all in his music. His guitar playing style is so interesting. It's incredibly rhythmic, but also very technical. He sort of plays like a piano. You've got the bass note going while you're doing a riff with your other fingers. It's a very syncopated way of playing that, frankly, not many people can do. So you've got that on top of the subject matter that he sang about, and just the way in which he sang. It had a very haunting, just presence to it. And even what I understand during his own time, it wasn't, of course, people in posterity came to respect his music, but he was very popular in Mississippi back in the day. So it was a real tragedy. He died at 27. People look back at that 27 club. Right. He was the first. He was poisoned by a jealous husband. He definitely had a reputation for enjoying the drink and the women, and there was
not
this
uncommon in music.
Not uncommon at all. So a jealous husband laced his whiskey with something, and a couple days later it killed him. So very tragic, but that's Robert Johnson.
Do you think that there'll be relevance for Robert Johnson today? It sounds like a horrible question, but I think as we see, just how the landscape of even the instruments that people are using now are so different. The guitar is unfortunately almost out of fashion. I think, obviously synthesizers and sampling is, taken front and center, at least in pop music. Do you feel like there's some specific relevance or things that young musicians today could be taken from Robert Johnson or some old folk blues specifically?
Absolutely. I think of all times, maybe since the 60s, now is where we might be best poised to see a resurgence, a bigger resurgence in the blues. Just think about some of the bands that have been really popular, sort of in that folk Americana thing. They're all second cousins of each other. So right. If that can make it mainstream again, certainly I think the blues can. I've also been involved with another organization called Overall Junction, and this was started as a virtual venue for blues musicians all over the world. It popped up during the pandemic, hosted by a couple of really great young blues musicians. And through that, I've seen just some absolutely amazing talent that's out there. And, unfortunately, it's still a little difficult for people to get out and play in person now. But it is right there, just under the surface, ready to emerge again.
I was speaking to a harmonica player years ago. He pointed out, it's like, every 15, 20 years, the blues just comes back. Came back in the 60s, came back in the 80s, came back a little in the late 90s. Hopefully your clock is right, and we'll see it pop back up now.
I hope it does, yeah. But I know it will.
Mainstream music, so to speak, it's become so overprocessed and so predictable and so perfect, where, everything's to a grid, everything's just so that I almost feel that there's going to be a bit of a backlash against it to get back to more, the feeling of people making music and more about the vibe and more about the song and less about the perfect production.
Absolutely. And that's what I think is so cool about those early recordings, especially the blues guys, which for the most part, they were solo musicians and everything was recorded live. I mean, of course it was the 30s, but, even some of the later blues, but I mean, imperfections is always part of it. Some of my favorite stuff isn't, it doesn't sound processed. You feel a little bit of the room. You feel what you get this sense of the space in which they're playing in as well. And I think and hope that is a style that comes back into play. You get up and you play in front of people. If you miss something, you got to keep going on. Nobody's ever perfect.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Jesse. You've been so cool to us, and he and I connected on Facebook a few months back, and I heard some stories about Jesse from Russell over the years, and it was always proud papa stuff of like, oh, you got to hear my son Jesse, great guitar player, great singer. I love that Jesse is singing and writing, and that his career is also connected to the music industry now. Why don't we move on to some cutting room conversation with Liberty? As I've mentioned before, I've known Liberty for about 20 years now. And anytime he and I get on the phone or get on Zoom, it's like, catching up with an old friend. I don't know if you're familiar with, there's a singer-songwriter, this guy named Butch Walker. He's a fantastic producer. He's been in the business 30 plus years, was in a hair band in the 80s, like had a hit in an alternative band in the 90s. And he's been a solo artist for the last 20 years, but he also produces. He's done like Taylor Swift, Avril Lavigne. I mean, you name it under the sun. He can write and produce for these artists that allows him to fully fund what he loves. And he doesn't have to worry about, breaking the bank as a solo artist.
Well, right now it's the same thing for me with the Lords of 52nd Street. That's the money-making band, where the Slim Kings is like,
that's the passion project.
Yeah.
Not that the Lords aren't, but it's allowing you to not have to worry about it so much with the Slim Kings.
Right. And I love, playing with the Lords is like, it's like being 27 all over again. It's unbelievable. Fortunately,
I've been able to, see a couple of your shows so far, and the joy that the three of you especially are having playing those songs now. It's so fun to see.
It's a lot of fun. It's like when Billy writes in the beginning of the book, we were family,
mm-hmm.
and we left it all on the stage. And that's what we did. And, we continue to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, when we got together the first time, it was the same jokes. It was like there was no gap of time in between when we last played.
It's funny you mentioned that too, because I remember in our Florida days, you hadn't seen Russ in a while. I remember he was coming to town for like a convention or something. I remember you mentioned that you guys had seen each other in a bit. And I'm like, okay, I got to get the two of you in a room. It's been too long. And I remember the three of us sitting down, and it was like you two just jumped right in like no time had passed. I was just like, I'm just going to sit back and watch you go.
It's funny. I did the same thing with Billy too, when I started to email back and forth, and we still do the same silly jokes,
It's great that you can, you've been able to pick that back up with him as well.
Oh yeah. Well, that whole thing, it was like when the Lords of 52nd Street, me and Russell and Doug, along with Doug Stegmeyer, got inducted into the Long Island Music Hall of Fame. I wasn't going to go. I was still bitter about that whole thing. But when somebody said, why don't the Lords get back together? Why don't you guys get back together and start playing? Well, acquainting myself with the songs was a thrill, because I never really listened to them. Once you record them, you don't listen to them anymore.
Right.
Yeah. And so listening to them, I really learned to appreciate them. And I saw what great players were on those records,
mm-hmm.
and the arrangements and stuff like that, and how great Billy was as a writer. So now I had the songs back that I was falling in love with again, and I had the three guys back again.
Yeah.
All I needed was the one guy.
Right. And did that help give you the separation from like the pain that you had been going through, being able to rediscover the music and what you originally loved about it?
Oh yeah, because I used to, I didn't understand tribute bands. I didn't understand why people liked the band so much. Like, I don't get it, but then, listening again, and when I really discovered it, I went to see Danny Seraphine's Chicago. It's called the California Transit Authority, CTA, same thing.
Right.
And I saw them at the Cutting Room in Manhattan, and I was singing every song. Like, oh, I love this song. Oh, I remember this song. Oh, I had a girlfriend. She gave me this 45. Oh, all that kind of stuff. And somebody leaned over to me and said, "You see the way you're reacting to this band? That's how people reacted when the Lords play." It's the same thing. It clicked. It was like, I get it now. Everybody asks, what was it like? Did you know that you were going to make number one records when you were recording those songs? No, we didn't know that.
I think anyone who says they know is a liar, because you really don't know. I mean, there's so many variables that you really can't predict it.
Right.
Yeah.
You just can't, So you have fun. We were just a bunch of friends playing in the studio.
I always kind of laugh at that bad story that always got out there, that where Billy said that you hated reggae, which I knew was furthest from the truth. Right. You guys loved it.
I loved it. My beef there was that we shouldn't sound like we come from Jamaica because the Long Island Railroad. That's about the closest to Jamaica we've ever been.
Exactly. Yeah. Speaking of playing with different bass players, after Doug left, did you find that challenging as the different bass players would come along in the Billy band?
Skylar was the first one, Skylar Deal, that came in, and because it was going to be such a big change, I kind of like slid into it as like, okay, we're changing now. We're changing. I'm not going to fight this. We're going to change, and we're going to see what it comes out like. I'm not going to go in there going like, Doug's gone. This is going to stink. Get this guy. Who's this guy, Skylar? No, it wasn't like that. It was like, okay,
this is something.
This is going to be a new thing. We're opening a new chapter here. Okay, but then on the following tours, when Skylar left to go with Michael Bolton, and we were going on tour, I remember getting the call from T-Bone Walk, and he said, Lib, what's the chances of me getting the gig? And Billy always said that it was up to me to pick the bass player, So I said, what, you really want it? He goes, yeah, I want it bad. Because at the time, he was doing Saturday Night Live. Now, the union scale, I think, was only like $1,000 for the players on Saturday Night Live to do the show. They only did 30 shows a year. So he had to fill in somehow.
And that's a lot of work for what they're doing, for what they're getting.
A lot of work. There's like 4 days of rehearsal and all this other stuff. But anyway, he loved the gig. He hated Billy's management, hated them. That was the biggest problem there. So he left. And then David Santos, I got David Santos in because I had been playing with David Santos with the All-Star Band. That I was playing with the
trying
Northwest
to think how you two were connected. Okay.
Remember that? Now, I know you now. By this time, I know we're friends.
Yeah.
And that was the connection. And David had it easy because his mother lived in Tampa. So he would drive over to my house and we would rehearse the Billy songs, just me and him.
Yeah.
And his first audition was the VH1 Behind the Music, where we did the concert and we played.
That Storytellers thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, that was it. And that was his first audition, the first time he played with us, and he was great. David was really good. He's a great bass player. He's doing so much now. His mistake was he wanted to get in on this TV show because at the time now, all the musicians were getting in his TV shows and playing, like the Roots are doing now and stuff like that. And there was this one show and he had to go for the second audition. And it was a time that we had to play with Billy. That's when Andy Chasson came in. He was a friend of Noel's from Australia.
Right.
Another good bass player, but
sure. Mm-hmm.
Not as aggressive as the other guys.
Yeah.
Doug was very aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
T-Bone was musically as good as Doug. Like he knew his instrument.
Oh yeah.
His number one instrument was the accordion. T-Bone. That was his main instrument.
I think there were instances, especially on that River of Dreams tour, where he would play accordion in the songs that called for it. And it was so nice on that run to have like actual live accordion on stage and not just a keyboard patch.
Right.
It really was nice. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was a great musician. Great musician.
Yeah.
But he hated Billy's management. We were like the Indians and they were the United States government. They promised us the world and we're like, well.
Right. Yeah. That's a good analogy. Yeah.
It was horrible. And then Andy was good. He was there.
Yeah.
But, that was it. And
yeah,
I was done.
And then you were gone and who knows?
I was done. And then, didn't play for a while, just did studio work. And the first one I hooked up with was, but was always talking to Russell and not so much Richie until I moved back to Brooklyn.
Okay.
Richie, I would talk to when Doug died, or talk to Richie. There was another time when me and Richie, were communicating back and forth. But Russell, always. Russell was always there, and when he was making the toys in China, he was living in China for a while. We found out, I went over there to do a clinic at this music fair.
Mm-hmm.
And he was at a toy fair at the time. We were one building away from each other and didn't know it.
No kidding. All the way across the world.
But yeah, he's always been there. We used to talk, you know, we're getting older. So if anything goes wrong with one of us, it's like how to
yeah, this happened to you. Yeah.
Yeah. I got my oil changed and, you know, but yeah. And Suzanne, you know, of course I've known Suzanne for years.
Yeah.
We've always been in touch, you know, so it's great playing with the Lords now because we're all there.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's comedy.
It's an interesting dynamic because it's the three of you and then, you know, the rest of the band that got put together. How has that been playing these songs with those new guys?
Malcolm, the bass player,
mm-hmm.
Malcolm Gold. In the beginning, I was like, I don't know about this guy, but we eventually caught on and really tight now. And I understand when you first go and play with somebody, especially at the caliber of Richie Cannata or something like that, you know, or what I have done with my career and stuff like that, you get a little nervous and you're still playing your style. Well, Malcolm had to learn Doug's parts.
Right.
You know, note for note, when he found out that he was playing with me, he has to learn those parts. So he's great now. Malcolm, I can play anytime with Malcolm. And you know, we always worry that, you know, there'd be dates that they can't make, some of the guys, because, you know, they have to work.
Right. So, right. It's not everyone's only gig. Yeah.
Right. So I just always hope that Malcolm will be there. You know, Doug, the other keyboard player, the electronic keyboard player, is a great guy. Just a great guy. And he's also a great guitar player. Doug. Yeah,
oh, no
really good. You've heard his stuff. I posted some of his stuff on my page.
Yeah.
He plays and sings. Yeah. And Dennis is great. You know, Dennis was in Moving Out. He did the Moving Out on Broadway.
Yeah.
And the chair was Dave Clark's. Billy's chair.
Right.
The Billy chair. And Dave was great. Dave does a lot of other stuff also. So Dave split. And now we have a new guy, Dan Orlando is his name.
Okay.
He's a younger guy, and he sounds more like the 70s Billy.
Oh, cool.
We still do the songs in the key of the album, and he hits every note like it's not a problem.
Wow.
You know, yeah. Okay. So it's really good. I mean, as far as the camaraderie goes, of course, there's the three of us.
Yeah.
And you know, Malcolm, we love Malcolm. We love the guys in the band.
Oh yeah.
You know, so it's great. Andy is our fearless leader, Andy Gilmartin.
He's great.
Who thinks we're all crazy for doing what we're doing. You know, like we're all pain in the asses.
Just be like, well, it's your fault.
Right. Andy will love us one day and then hate us the next, you know.
Right. Well, then you're good. That's how it should be.
Yeah. Well, that's management, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, hey, Andy, why don't we go play in China somewhere? What do you want to do that for? It's so stupid. What do you want to, you know, you're not going to make the money of it. Okay, we won't go. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But he was smart during the pandemic because a lot of bands have a set price that they ask for. A lot of bands lowered their price way down just so they could do gigs, you know, at half houses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But Andy said, no, let's hold out and we'll keep our price. You know, it'll eventually come around again. And I think he was smart doing that, you know, keeping us above the water, you know.
That is a good move because honestly, I think had you guys dropped, it would have been harder to get back.
Right, exactly.
To that level, yeah.
Exactly. Billy knew it because he said on Glass Houses, I want that band that's playing live to play with me. Everybody in the studio, nobody overdubs. There's no overdubs on the Glass Houses album. It's just us, the same guys that you saw on the stage.
Those songs translated so well live because of that reason.
We were like playing them live in the studio. You know, maybe you'd overdub Shakers or something like that on your Maybe Write Us, you know, stuff like that.
That's the one thing I noticed in that era, 79 to 81, especially when you guys would play something from that album. I'm like, well, yeah, there's the record. Like it just... And you know, and it was at the time too where like David and Russell's guitar tones were kind of dialed into that Glass Houses sound. So even more so, it sounded so faithful to that album live, just because it was the five of you in there. And
then Richie leaves because he has so much else to do. He's got to make a decision now, and we do Nylon Curtain. which still has the same band, but not a whole lot of people are overdubbing on it. Just maybe at the end of the refrain of Allentown.
Oh, right.
I think, what's his name plays? Michael Brecker or something plays.
Yeah, I think there's a clarinet or something near the end there, a saxophone. Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise it's just that band again,
But, between Glass Houses and the Nylon Curtain, those certainly seem like very different studio experiences between the two.
Oh, they were. Glass Houses was like, because it was still in A&R studios, the ones we did Stranger and the 52nd Street in. So we're really familiar with that.
Yeah.
And it was still a lot of fun. I mean, they started to push us out of the A&R during the recording of Nylon Curtain. We were recording in this church in New York that was converted into a studio. We were recording in a bunch of different studios. And Billy had his motorcycle accident in the middle of it.
That's right.
That really took, that album took a year to do because of his motorcycle accident.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where the other ones, what's that one? Innocent Man. It was 4 weeks, 6 weeks to make the basic tracks. That was it, done.
Wow, that's incredibly fast. I didn't know it was that fast.
And he's writing the songs in the studio with us there. He's not writing. He didn't have them all written, and he comes in and goes, "Okay, we're going to do this one, we're going to do that one." No, he comes in with 2 songs, and the rest are written in the studio.
It seems like being with you guys in there, just jamming on things would kind of spark him to write more as you guys are doing this.
Oh yeah. It's like you ask me a question and I answer it. While I'm answering it, you're going like, "Oh yeah," and you go to the next one because of the answer that I just gave you.
Right, a lot of that.
A lot of that. A lot of that.
It seems like Phil was able to strike that balance with you guys, though. Knew when to let you guys just go crazy, but also knew when to wrangle it in and be like, "All right, time to go."
Yeah, time to work, time to get it done. Yeah, I think he used to sit there and let us bang out the song, whatever, for an hour. Just let's try this. You can hear it on the microphone. So let's try this. Hey, Lib, try this. Hey, David, try this. Then Phil would hit the talkback button. You hear the click, and you go, "Okay, so you guys want to know how the song should really go?"
There's nothing worse than being in the studio is finishing a take and there being nothing in your headphones, like no one's saying anything, so the fact that he could, cut that tension real quick and, lighten it. Yeah.
We were in with Karen Carpenter, Russell was in on that. He wrote two or three of the songs that Karen did. And I remember she said, we were doing a song called Make Believe It's your first time and I'll make believe it's mine. That's the line she's singing, right? It's a beautiful ballad. And for some reason we stopped and I said, "Karen, you know what it should be? You should say, make believe it's your first time and I'll guarantee it's mine." Everybody could not stop laughing. Phil was even laughing in the control room. We had to stop the session. Couldn't stop laughing.
Yeah.
And Russ needs to tell you the story about when Phil was called out for a phone call, and it was such a long time before he came back. And I'm going in the studio and on the microphone, I'm going like, we're trying to think of what happened to this person. Why is Phil still out there? Or,
right.
Maybe she ate something bad. Maybe, and I'm going, "Oh, maybe she jumped out the window," and I'm making noises on the microphone and stuff like that. And Phil comes back in and we said, "Well, what happened? What took you so long?" My friend committed suicide. He jumped out a window or something like that. We just started laughing.
Oh my gosh. It's so terrible. But I mean, the circumstances of you guys just riffing off of that. Oh my gosh.
And then we explained it to Phil and he started laughing too. That's what was great about making those records. I mean, it was like, Billy was strict to like, "Okay, we're going to start at noon. And if we don't get something by 8, we're going home. We're going to do 12 to 8. That's the shift we're going to do. Just like a regular working. We're coming to a regular job. We played live.
Is that typically when you guys would record during the day like that? Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Never at night.
Yeah.
If we were really close to getting something, we would go longer.
Sure.
But, if it was like, okay, we didn't get anything,
Enough
that's
for
it,
today.
but come back tomorrow.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, he was so normal in the work schedule that we used to sing as we were walking up to the stage at the live shows. We would sing "Hi ho, hi ho." It's off to work we go.
Yeah.
Like that was our job. Can you believe it? That was our job.
Yeah. It's amazing. That definitely doesn't suck.
No, it doesn't suck. It sucks sometimes, but
Well, not every night's
but-
going to be amazing, but that's like that with any job. But
yeah.
your good nights are better than a lot of some others.
Our bad nights are better than a lot of other good nights.
That's a good point. Now, was there a moment when you knew that things were going to change within the band when, Russell and Doug weren't going to continue on?
Well, I knew that Doug was having a substance problem,
Mhm.
and Doug always said that the ATM machine was the downfall of Doug Stegmeyer, because you could always get $100 and pull it out of your bank account in an ATM machine, and so that was really bad. And I remember walking out of my room once, being one of the last ones to go down to the bus or to get to the plane, and I saw the cleaning lady clean out Doug's room, and there was like a whole 6-pack of beer on the room service tray. So I knew he was drinking alone. And during the bridge, when he didn't make it a few times because he had to go into the hospital, his pancreas was getting swollen and stuff like that. And, it was like he's had it, and
Sure.
Doug was getting heavy. And so when he was cut, the only reason why Russell got cut was because it was convenient. Doug's going, I can get rid of, Russell can go to.
It's like the excuse of like, all right, now I'm going to revamp.
I'm going to revamp. So I'm getting rid of Doug. I might as well clean house and get new guys.
Yeah.
Like
when Richie left, no slag on Mark Rivera or Dave LeBolt, but, they had to replace Richie with 2 people.
Yep. It took 2 people to replace Richie. Richie was not only the greatest sax player, but he was also the utility man. I mean, he played the accordion on Piano Man or Scenes or whatever.
Yeah.
He had that stupid little electronic thing called Elka.
Oh, yeah.
In front, on top of the Hammond organ. He played the Hammond organ.
Yep.
He played the flute. He played the sax. He played the clarinet. He played everything,
He was doing harmonica back then.
Yeah.
I think, I always liken it to like baseball, like how valuable a utility player is. It's like to be able to have one guy obviously excels, obviously organ and sax were the meat of what he did, but
Right.
like, yeah, I could do this. I could pick up this part. I could sing this part. I could play whatever on this. It's amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 guys to replace him. I can remember sitting in the studio and I could not figure out what to play on Set de Trois. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm trying everything. And I can see Russell doing the same thing that Phil Ramone did on Just the Way You Are, playing a little something in air drums. And I'm thinking like, that could be cool,
Yeah.
But that's the way that the band was. I could tell David Brown, why don't you try this? Or, I remember telling Richie what to play in stiletto on the organ. Bop, 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 just very percussive,
Yeah.
and things like that. And Richie telling me, like, why do you hear good, only good are young? You're gonna drive me crazy, and stuff like that. We did that for each other.
That speaks to the relationship you had with each other. One, things weren't precious and couldn't, nothing was untouchable. And you were all comfortable enough with each other that to where those suggestions could be made and no one's going to get hurt.
We all knew our parts. We all knew what we did. It's funny. The sessions, the thing I do with Jules and Dom and all them, they just interviewed my daughter, Tori. And Dom said, well, being an actor and being in a series is kind of like being in a band, isn't it? And Tori said, the only difference between being in a band and being an actor in a series with a bunch of people is that everybody in the series wants to be the lead singer. Rather than in a band, everybody knows their spot.
Liberty, thanks again, man. You've been so great to us, and anytime we've reached out, you've been more than happy to get on the phone or hop on a Zoom and chat with us and share so many amazing stories.
Interested to see what we come up with next.
Yeah, adjusting. We're always thinking of different ways to do things, and
not to pat ourselves on the back, but I'm thrilled with how a lot of the stuff we did this year came out, and I don't mind saying that because the feedback and the listenership we've gotten this year has been astounding and humbling. And when we started, we were getting maybe 50 downloads a week, when something came out or something like that, and it's like gone up exponentially this year. And we were a little worried because we didn't know what was going to happen when the world opened back up. If people were just gonna, if we were going to be the toy that got thrown in the closet,
yeah.
It's been amazing. It's been like so much work, but it's been worth it to see how much people have enjoyed it, to be able to tell the band member stories, to be able to fill in these gaps in the history, things like that.
Obviously get some of this on the record and tell these stories, but also a way to show, everybody who's been involved in the Billy Joel band and the Billy Joel camp, how much we appreciate what they do, from Mike Del Judas to Russell Javors and everybody in between, every era of the band. And, we're also, we've got a couple exciting things already on tap for next year. We're going to be talking with Edward O'Dowd, who's been Billy's art director for a decade. Mm-hmm. Ernesto Juan, who is working on what sounds to be incredible, the Havana Jam.
Oh yeah.
Documentary. Yeah. And so there are so many fascinating people who have been touched by Billy's music or Billy's work in all these different ways. And we've got a lot of really cool stories coming up. And I'm just very grateful to be the hub where we can gather all these.
Yeah, it's been amazing. So thank you to all our guests. I'd say also thank you to Andy Gilmartin, manager for the Lords of 52nd Street, for helping out.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy's an old friend. And
thanks also to Gretchen Brennison at Sony Music. We met her, via email late in the year as the vinyl collection Volume 1 was coming out. And she was instrumental in, making sure we had a copy that we could open and review, connecting us with Edward O'Dowd so we can talk to him about the art direction on this project and others. And with that in mind, once again, we thank you all too. Thank you for chiming in. Thank you for giving us your anecdotes, your stories about, your experiences meeting Billy, meeting the band, discovering the music, going to all those concerts, and keep them up. We love reading them. Send them on over. glasshousespodcast@gmail.com, or find us on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Your reviews and your ratings have been instrumental in helping tell the Spotify and Apple algorithms that we are something worth checking out. So if you haven't gotten around to that, it's something that takes 2 seconds and helps us go a long way. If you could leave that 5-star rating or positive review, it really helps us a lot. And you're the reason why we're growing. You sharing a post, you telling a friend about it, you're the reason why we're continuing to do what we do. Otherwise, we're just two Billy Joel fans geeking out over the music we love.
So thanks a lot, and we'll see you next year.
We will see you in 2022. Thanks, guys.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Should all acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should all acquaintance be forgot and days of old lang syne? For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for all lang syne.